Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today we are diving into a story that has shocked political analysts, energy experts, and geopolitical observers around the world. The situation between Belarus and Russia has taken a dramatic turn, revealing how deeply Moscow now relies on its smaller neighbor for gasoline supplies at a moment when the pressure inside Russia is reaching new heights. This unexpected dependency has exposed vulnerabilities that many believed Russia would never face, and the ripple effects are now spreading far beyond Eastern Europe. What we are witnessing is not just an energy issue, but a powerful shift in how influence and leverage operate in the region. For years, the world viewed Russia as the unquestioned giant of energy. With its massive oil production, vast natural reserves, and an energy network stretching across continents, Russia appeared nearly immune to supply shortages. Moscow was the capital that provided others with fuel, not one that begged for it. Yet the recent crisis has flipped the narrative. Russia is facing gasoline shortages that have forced the Kremlin to quietly but urgently depend on Belarus to keep domestic markets stable and avoid economic chaos. This dependency is not only surprising, it's a stunning reversal that exposes how internal pressures and strategic miscalculations have undermined what once seemed like an unshakable energy empire. Belarus, once viewed as Russia's loyal partner, now finds itself in a position of sudden leverage. For years, its economy depended heavily on subsidized Russian energy. But with Russia struggling to meet its own needs, Minsk has found a rare opportunity to shift the balance of power. Without announcing it publicly, Belarus increased gasoline exports to Russia at a time when Moscow needed them the most. This move was not charity, it was strategy. Belarus saw the cracks forming in Russia's system and understood that for the first time in decades, Moscow was vulnerable in an area that had long been its greatest strength. Inside Russia, the gasoline shortage has become a political and economic headache. Local markets faced sudden price spikes, long queues formed at fuel stations, and officials scrambled to impose temporary bans on exports to stabilize domestic supply. But these measures were not enough. The Kremlin had to turn to Belarus for immediate support, hoping to prevent unrest in key regions and stop traders from speculating. This created a quiet but unmistakable signal. Russia's domestic production was no longer keeping up with demand, and its refineries were struggling under pressure from aging infrastructure. Sanctions and logistical disruptions. Sanctions have played a major role in this crisis. Over the past years, Western restrictions on technology, financing, and energy exports have slowly weakened the efficiency of Russia's refining sector. While Russia still pumps vast amounts of crude oil, turning that crude into usable gasoline and diesel requires advanced equipment, foreign components, and consistent investment. Things Moscow can no longer access easily. The result is a system that produces less gasoline than the Russian economy needs, especially during peak agricultural and transport seasons. This gap between supply and demand has grown quietly but significantly, and eventually pushed Russia into a corner where Belarus became the lifeline. Belarus took this chance to strengthen its own political survival. President Alexander Lukashenko, often portrayed as dependent on Moscow for security and support, suddenly found himself holding a valuable bargaining chip. By providing gasoline to Russia at crucial moments, Belarus can negotiate for more financial aid, better trade terms, and political concessions. This situation has created a new layer of tension beneath the surface of the Moscow-Minsk relationship. Actions that once looked like loyalty now look like necessity. Belarus is no longer simply following Russia. It is positioning itself as an indispensable partner. The international community has been stunned by this development. Experts who monitor energy flows were surprised to see Russia, one of the world's largest oil producers, importing more gasoline than expected. Once analysts connected the dots, the picture became clear. Russia was depending heavily on Belarus to cover its shortfall. This revelation has sparked debates in Europe, Asia, and the Middle East about Russia's true capacity to sustain long-term energy operations while under economic strain. If Moscow is facing difficulties with something as basic as gasoline, what does that mean for larger sectors that require more advanced technology? For Russia, the political stakes are extremely high. The Kremlin understands that energy stability is essential for maintaining public confidence, especially during times of war and economic uncertainty. A shortage of gasoline can lead instantly to public frustration. No INDIVIDUAL could charival a GLARICULTURL delays and logistical problems across regions that rely heavily on transportation. Moscow cannot afford widespread discontent. By securing gasoline from Belarus, Russia buys time, but the underlying problem remains unresolved. The question is not whether Russia can survive this year's shortage, but how often it will need similar emergency measures in the future. Inside Belarus, the situation is equally complex. While Minsk has gained leverage, it must act carefully. Helping Russia provides short-term benefits, but it also risks deeper entanglement in Russia's conflicts and economic instability. Belarusian refineries are efficient, but they have limits. Increasing gasoline exports to Russia could reduce Belarus's own strategic reserves. Lukashenko understands that although he now holds negotiating power, Russia's long-term problems could become Belarus's problems if the crisis escalates. This delicate balance is shaping every decision Minsk makes. Behind the scenes, energy traders and regional experts are analyzing this crisis as a sign of a broader shift in Eurasia's geopolitical landscape. The power dynamic between Russia and its neighbors has changed subtly but significantly. Belarus, Kazakhstan, and even smaller states like Armenia and Kyrgyzstan are watching closely. If Russia, the traditional powerhouse, is struggling to maintain energy stability, then the architecture of influence in the region may be entering a new era. Countries that once depended on Moscow may start looking for alternative alliances, partnerships, and energy sources. At the same time, Russia's adversaries see an opportunity. Western policymakers argue that the gasoline crisis proves sanctions are working. They point to Russia's increasing reliance on Belarus as evidence that Moscow's industrial base is shrinking. But this is only part of the story. Russia is also adapting, finding new routes, new markets, and new methods to keep its economy functioning. The gasoline shortage is a blow, but it is not a knockout. The Kremlin is already investing heavily in new refining technologies, domestic production of components, and partnerships with countries that are willing to bypass sanctions. Still, the vulnerability is real. When a country as large as Russia needs gasoline imports from a smaller neighbor, it raises questions about the sustainability of its energy system. It also raises questions about how far Belarus can push its leverage before Russia seeks another solution. Historically, Moscow does not like being dependent on anyone, especially in its own backyard. This dynamic may create friction in the future, even if both countries maintain their alliance publicly. The global energy markets have reacted with caution. Even a temporary disruption in Russia's gasoline supply can influence oil prices, shipping rates, and regional energy flows. Traders are monitoring Belarusian export levels closely, understanding that they now play an unexpected role in stabilizing Russia's internal market. This shift has created new patterns in trade routes, refinery output, and storage levels across Eastern Europe. Countries like Latvia, Lithuania, and Poland are watching carefully as the flows of fuel shift between Russia and Belarus, affecting regional competitiveness. Meanwhile, ordinary people inside Russia have felt the impact in their daily lives. Rising gasoline prices have added pressure to households already struggling with inflation and economic uncertainty. Farmers worry about running machinery during crucial harvest seasons. Transport companies face higher operational costs. The government insists the crisis is under control, but citizens remember similar shortages during past economic downturns, and many fear the situation could worsen quickly if new disruptions occur. The crisis has also raised questions about Russia's energy strategy. For decades, the country focused on exporting crude oil and natural gas because these exports brought in massive revenue. But domestic refining received less attention. Now the absence of modernized refineries and the lack of Western technology are creating gaps that the Kremlin never anticipated. Analysts are discussing whether Russia must now shift focus toward rebuilding its domestic refining capabilities, even if it means cutting back on exports temporarily. Belarus, on the other hand, has built a reputation for running highly efficient refineries despite limited resources. This efficiency has allowed Minsk to become a key player in regional gasoline supply instead of merely a transit state. The irony is striking. A country long viewed as dependent on Russia now supports Russia's fuel needs during a critical moment. This reversal has elevated Belarus's strategic value, giving Lukashenko something he has rarely possessed: negotiating power against Moscow. In global geopolitics, such shifts often lead to long, lasting consequences. If Russia continues to rely on Belarus, it may need to offer concessions that reshape the political relationship between the two countries. Belarus could secure more favorable trade terms, greater economic aid, or even political guarantees. But if Russia finds a way to solve its refining problems quickly, Belarus may lose this advantage just as fast as it gained it. This creates a narrow window in which Minsk must act decisively but carefully. The situation has also encouraged debates about Russia's broader economic future. A nation under sanctions, fighting a prolonged conflict, and managing internal pressures cannot afford repeated energy crises. Some economists warn that the gasoline shortage is an early sign of deeper systemic issues within Russia's industrial base. Others argue that Russia has enough resilience to rebuild, adapt, and survive as it has done many times before. The truth is likely somewhere in the middle, but the uncertainty itself is part of the problem. Energy analysts are now mapping out scenarios for the future. One scenario suggests that Russia will invest heavily in domestic refining, gradually reducing dependence on Belarus, but at a significant economic cost. Another scenario suggests that Russia will double down on partnerships with Belarus, effectively merging some of their energy systems to create mutual dependence. A third scenario suggests that Russia may diversify its imports, seeking gasoline from other friendly countries, though this would require complex logistics. In Belarus, the public reaction has been mixed. Some citizens feel pride that their refineries are strong enough to support a major power like Russia. Others fear that becoming too involved in Russia's crisis could draw Belarus deeper into geopolitical conflicts. The government has remained cautious in its public statements, avoiding any language that suggests dominance or exploitation. Lukashenko understands that while Belarus holds temporary leverage, Russia remains the larger and more powerful partner. As the story spreads, many people around the world are asking how Russia, with its enormous energy sector, could fall into such a crisis. The answer lies in the combination of sanctions, aging infrastructure, and internal priorities that shifted too far toward exports. When the system came under stress, the cracks that had been forming below the surface suddenly became visible. Belarus simply happened to be in the right place at the right time, with the capacity to fill the gap. The truth is that dependencies in geopolitics are rarely permanent. Today, Belarus may hold the advantage, but tomorrow the situation may shift. What makes this story so fascinating is not just the gasoline itself, but the symbolism behind it. A regional power that once dominated its neighbors is now exposed in a way that few saw coming. And a smaller nation that spent decades under pressure from Moscow now finds itself holding a position of influence. As we watch this crisis unfold, one thing is clear. The balance of power in Eastern Europe is changing, not because of a war, election, or treaty, but because of something as basic and essential as gasoline. This moment will be remembered as a turning point, a reminder that even the strongest states can face unexpected vulnerabilities. And for Belarus, it is a rare moment to step onto the global stage with newfound strategic value. The world is now watching what happens next. Will Russia repair its refining system quickly and end its dependence? Will Belarus push for concessions while it still holds leverage? Will the crisis deepen and spread into other sectors of the economy? These questions will define the next chapter of this story, and the answers will shape the future of Russia, Belarus, and the regions surrounding them. What is certain is that this gasoline crisis has exposed truths that were hidden for years. Russia's energy dominance is not as absolute as many once believed. Belarus is not as dependent as it once seemed, and the geopolitical map of Eurasia is shifting in ways that will continue to surprise the world. This situation marks a new era where leverage comes not only from military might or political alliances, but from the ability to deliver essential resources at the right moment. Belarus seized that moment. Russia was forced to accept it, and the world has been left stunned by a reversal of roles that no one expected. The gasoline lifeline between Belarus and Russia is more than an economic arrangement. It is a symbol of changing power, shifting influence, and the unpredictable nature of global politics.